it's recording. So today we are going to do the final method or the approach, which is called as the eclectic approach. Its main proponent was Rivers, and he came up with this approach in 1981. Now this approach or the method consists of many methods. Now, which methods form this eclectic approach, or which approaches form this eclectic approach or method, we cannot say for sure, but because it really depends. It has been left on the teacher to select from a variety of methods or approaches to conduct her classes for teaching of second language, and in our cases, of course, it's teaching of English as a second language, right? Now, what was the need for eclectic approach? Eclectic approach was needed because there are a number of applied linguists who believe that there was a realization that none of the methods was fully successful. Okay, so finding a perfect or ideal method was unachievable because each method had its weaknesses and its strengths, right? And this is what we have been doing while we were doing all those methods. From one method, we moved to another method, and from one method, these linguists try to develop another or better method, looking at the weaknesses of the previous method. But the method that they came up with, that they invented or they worked or they came up after research, that also was not devoid of its weaknesses, right? So these were the practical difficulties in achieving all the language objectives and aims of the course with a single method. Okay, but again, one cannot deny the strength of each method. Each method comes with its own strengths for enhancing the language teaching and learning. So things got complex and complicated in heterogeneous classrooms. So adherence to one method, it became a real challenge for the teachers and for material designers, for program organizers, for the students themselves. So these teachers and linguists looked for an integrated approach. Okay, integrated means when things are added together. And what was added together in eclectic approach? Different methods, different techniques, different activities taken from, of course, different methods, right? So all of that was integrated, and an integrated approach was formed to meet the challenges and complex environment of the classrooms or language teaching classrooms, right? So this was the need that eclectic method came into being. Now, eclectic as a word, if you look for it in the dictionary, it's just not for teaching of the second language, right? Generally, it means to borrow from diverse sources, or selecting or choosing the best, all of these. And this is called as eclecticism. Okay, this can be a part of psychology, this can be part of philosophy and other discipline of knowledge. So here we use it as eclectic approach in second language teaching. Okay, let me add few of your class fellows. Okay, right. So now River, who is the adherent or the proponent of this method or this approach, eclectic approach, he states that this approach basically allows the teacher, it gives them a lot of freedom to make use of the best techniques and the knowledge of teaching methods in their classroom procedures, right? So it basically gives a lot of flexibility, and we discuss what kind of teachers are required. It is just not random selection. It cannot be random selection or random integration of activities in the classroom. Okay, the selection needs to be taken on certain grounds, right? So these methods, this eclectic approach, uh, methods for eclectic approach can be chosen from a wide range of methods, starting from grammar translation method to communicative language teaching. Okay, and the teacher can take advantage of all these methods and approaches, taking the strengths of all the methods and avoiding their disadvantages or weaknesses. So that's why, eclectic approach can be the best teaching approach in the modern times. So as I told you, that the selection or choosing from amongst the methods or the material or the techniques cannot be random. For that, a teacher should possess a very good understanding of the methods, all the methods that are available to her. Then she should understand the student's experience, what is their goal, what is the need of the students, where they are supposed to use this language, do they need to speak it on daily basis, do they need the language to read the literature in the other language. So because everyone learns the language for different purposes. Okay, we learn the language basically for academic purposes. We do not need this language for day-to-day communication. We don't communicate in English usually. So we learn English for academic purposes, but and the situation of immigrants is quite different. Someone who is migrating to native English speaking countries would need the language more for speaking and less for writing and reading, more for listening and speaking and less for reading and writing. So that, that really depends on the need of the students. Okay, and the teacher should be aware of it while selecting or integrating different methods, techniques, approaches, material, all of that. Okay, so it's just not giving the teacher freedom, but it's about giving the teacher freedom with a lot of responsibilities. Okay, now let's talk about the characteristics of this method. Ludana, I've added the girls. There's just one more girl here. Okay. We have done what kind of teachers are needed, and then it is a combination of methods from grammar translation to communicative approach. Okay. So we would like to see, before seeing, of course, there are many advantages to it. Let's talk about what are the characteristics of this eclectic approach or the principles. Now, this approach, eclectic approach or eclectic method of language teaching, is a very subjective kind of an approach. Okay, because it's about individuals selection. Teacher as an individual selects everything for the class. Okay, how would the class go, what would be the activities she would be conducting, what are the needs of the students. So since all of this varies in different classrooms and it varies from class to class, so eclectic approach is a very subjective kind of approach to teaching. Okay, and the second characteristic of eclectic approach is that the role of L1 in learning of L2 is unavoidable, right? Because L2 is important to keep the students relaxed. Okay, L1 is important. L1 is important to keep the student motivated so that they do not feel themselves as failures when they are unable to communicate completely in L2. So L1 is allowed whenever they want help from the L1 and they want to fall back on L1. So the teacher can allow the students, code switching in the classrooms or code mixing. Okay, it's not that the complete class would be conducted in L1, but students might be struggling sometimes for words from the mother tongue. So they are allowed to code switch and code mix in the classrooms, right? So it provides opportunity to make use of both interlingual and cross-lingual approaches in language teaching. Now, the third characteristic of eclectic approach is it's being situational and context specific. Okay, so how is it context specific? Because the teacher has the understanding about where she's conducting the classes. She is aware about the situation of the students, the local situation, all of these. So then she gets to design this particular approach. So as a characteristic, this approach is very much situational and context specific and context dependent. Okay, she has to contextualize her teaching. It should be localized. It should be according to the students, to the place where a teaching is taking place, whether it's a native country where the teaching is taking place, or whether it's a country where the language is taught as a second language, or it's a country where the language is taught as a foreign language. So that's why eclectic approach is said to be very much context dependent. Another important characteristic of eclectic approach is considering errors as a part of learning process. It doesn't mean that the teacher does not correct the errors, but she would correct the errors at the end of any activity. Okay, immediate error correction is not a part of eclectic approach because it might demotivate the students. Okay, so errors are corrected, but not immediately and in some good way. Okay, and especially when it comes to communicative activity. So the teachers and the fellow students get involved in giving feedback. That can be corrective feedback also, so that every student can learn about his mistake and other mistakes too. Okay. In teaching of grammar, the eclectic approach, it places more importance on the deductive approach. Okay, so eclectic math, if one needs to, that really depends. Some teachers would like to teach grammar in their classroom and some teachers would not like to teach grammar. So the teachers who would like to teach grammar in their classrooms, the approach is usually a deductive one. Okay, what is the deductive approach to grammar teaching? Quickly go to your chats. Okay, Durdana, what you are asking, I'll do that. I'm not really, getting time these days to upload videos on the YouTube, but I would definitely do it. Okay. Yes, my question is, what is deductive approach when it comes to teaching of grammar? Quickly, just in a sentence. Okay. Okay, rules are provided and then, they're asked to apply those rules, right? Now, this is also not for definite that eclectic approach would make use of deductive approach for language teaching. They can use inductive approach as well. Okay, deductive is better as far as, this eclectic approach is concerned, but it can be inductive approach. Also, it can be an integration of both. So such is the freedom. It's not that you have to stick to one approach as in the rest of the methods. One day you are using deductive approach, after Some days you come to an inductive approach for teaching, right? And then at another time you can integrate both. You can mix or you can put these both of the approaches in practice at different times, maybe for teaching different grammatical structures, right? So another important characteristic is that these eclectic classrooms are usually learner-centered classrooms. Okay, so but again, this is not compulsory. Sometimes when the teacher wants to give them input, she can have a teacher-centered classroom. At other times, she can have a learner-centered classroom. At another time, she can have both. Okay, both the participation of both the teachers and the learners. But the suggested kind of a classroom is that much of the time eclectic classrooms are learner-centered classroom, because learner-centered classroom are the modern classrooms. An eclectic approach is a modern kind of a method, right? That's why it encourages learner-centered classrooms. Okay, but again, that's not really compulsory. Another characteristic of eclectic approach is that it views the language as a whole. It does not divide the language, to structures and forms and grammar and all of that. Preferably, the language should be taught as a whole. Okay. Language as a whole means language for as used for functions. Okay. Language, functional approach to language. Let's put it this way, right? So the aim and objective of eclecticism is to make the learners functional in the use of language. That is why it sees language as a whole. It does not see language as, teaching of skills separately or dividing the language to be taught in the classroom. That language should be taught as a whole, one thing. Okay, right. We have already talked about the role of the teacher in eclectic classroom is just a facilitator. Okay, her role is of course very important in the background because she's the one who would be selecting everything for the class. But during the class is usually learner-centered and she acts as a facilitator. Okay, and the learners in eclectic classrooms are active participants, right? So she has to perform a lot of tasks, but before the class, she should be organizing the material, she should be designing classroom procedures, and then during the class, she should be guiding the students to perform that. But the students are given a lot of freedom. Okay. Now, what makes a teacher become eclectic, right? We have already discussed this, that she should have a comprehensive knowledge of all the approaches, right? So then she needs to know the students as well. She should have done a need analysis, or she knows all the requirement of that particular environment where she is teaching the language, right? Other than that, understand the purpose of each student. She should be, flexible in not only choosing but implication of the methods also. She should be able to make the method very, very effective. Okay. And of course, she's not taking the whole method, so she should be careful that she takes the stronger parts of the method or the strengths of the method. Okay. Other than that, in eclectic way of teaching right now, because I told you that this is the most modern method, so a teacher is allowed to bring anything in the class that she thinks would facilitate the second language learning. For instance, she can bring in music, videos, pictures, computers, laptops. She can make use of internet through the Wi-Fi. So all the possible tools of 21st century, she is allowed to bring in the class. The target is to teach the students and to make them functional in the second language. So she has been given the freedom. Okay. And then if a teacher is good enough for eclectic approach, she would be able to change the prescribed material. Okay. And she would, change it with something that is very useful and productive for the learners. She should be very, very creative, because if she is changing something that is already prescribed, so she needs to make a good alternative for what she is trying to change, right? So this eclectic approach is not a confining method. It doesn't confine the teacher when it comes to, whether the classes would be deductive, inductive, teacher-centered, student-centered, making use of variety of resources, whatever is available to her. So it doesn't confine the teacher to a particular textbook or to, a whiteboard and a marker or anything like that. She can use anything and she can come up with whatever she feels is the requirement. Okay. As far as its criticism is concerned, we discussed that, there are no boundaries to this method, and there are no parameters. That happens to be the main criticism on this method, right? Because every other method that we have done, of course, works within certain boundaries. That this is the theoretical underpinning, and these activities can be done in this method, and these activities would not be done because that's not a part of. In some methods, L1 is allowed to be used in the classrooms. In other methods, L1 is not allowed to be used in the classroom. So there are definitely some boundaries, some borders in the rest of the methods, which is not the case in eclectic approach. Okay. The only parameter that bounds the teacher is the needs of the student. That's it. If this is the need of the students, if the deductive approach is the need of the students, then she would be using the deductive approach to teach structures. If inductive approach is the need of the students, then she would do that. Okay. If the students are hesitant to make learner-centered classrooms, so initially she cannot do that because the students are not ready for it. So slowly and gradually she can move from teacher-centered to student-centered classroom because she has the freedom to do that. Okay. So the freedom of choosing from different methods might discourage the teacher to counter-check their own teaching methods. Okay. Because they are choosing it from different methods, so sometimes they are even unable to check themselves whether they are correctly choosing it or they're not choosing it correctly for their students. Okay. So doing such activities which might sometimes get very, very random, right? And it can create confusions amongst the students and conflicts also within the institution and within the classrooms. Okay. So sometimes, when the teacher is not experienced or when the teacher is not competent enough for eclectic approach or for eclecticism, then it may happen that her choices would lead to confusion and conflicts in the classrooms and among the students, even in the mind of the teacher herself. She might get confused. Okay. Now, another criticism is that the teachers are, of course, not trained. Okay. So there is a need for training for the teachers how to choose and when to choose what. So the teachers who are not trained well in the use of different methods and who have a poor understanding of these will end up facing the disadvantages of this method. There would be no advantages of this method for the students if the teacher, is unable to select the right material. She's either not experienced, not competent, or does not have the knowledge of all the methods. So there is a need for the training also. If the training is not available, then If the training is not available, then things would not go as planned, and it would not be to any advantage of learners. So salient features are, of course, multiple tasks, high interaction, lively learning, fast results. These are the salient methods. Oh, sorry, salient features of this method. Okay, so of course there would be multiple tasks, and interaction is high because learners centered classrooms are encouraged, and then there is lively learning because the teacher keeps the students motivated, and she selects and chooses interesting activities from whatever material is available to her. Now, the basic purpose of selecting eclectic approach is to meet the requirements of the students. Okay, and the one requirement that eclectic approach should meet is to make students functional in the language, right? And this is the most modern method, and this connects real life experiences to the ideas that are presented in learning and teaching of the language. Because the teacher is allowed to use internet in the classroom. The teacher is allowed to use cell phones and other gadgets. So this being the modern method, so this really connects real life experiences to the ideas that are being presented in the class. Okay, so the activities that are recommended for eclectic approach should be directly connected to the real life experiences. That should make the classes really interesting for the students, and they would remain motivated, right? So this we have done, that teachers have the chance to choose from different kinds of teaching techniques. There's a flexibility. It gives the chance to the students to see different kinds of teaching techniques. And as I told you, that it is teachers' job to make this very, very interesting and to break the monotony. What is monotony? Okay, what is monotony? Quickly, breaks the monotony. Quickly, what do you mean by monotony? And then we are about to finish this. Okay. Single, not married. Mazid, what is single? Monotony means doing similar things every day. Okay. Yeah, lack of change is the right answer. Who is this lack of change? Yes, Neda. Yes, lack of change. So she should, of course, she has such a variety of things to choose from. So eclectic approach would break monotony in the classrooms. Okay, and it I told you that being a modern method, it connects the real life experiences. So there's some criteria, of course, a bit of parameters, but what should be taken care of, that it should remain simple for both the teachers and the learners. And of course, the input should be comprehensible, like +1. Okay, and as the teacher knows about the needs of the students, so she should also be evaluating their progress. If by one technique or by the techniques that she has chosen, the students are not progressing, so the teacher has the liberty to change the activities, okay, according to the needs of the students. So she should be seeing the progress, checking the progress of the students. That's a very balanced kind of an approach between spoken and written or printed words. and that really depends on the teacher, not on the teacher, but the needs of the students. What skills do they need more in a particular environment? Okay, so it must overcome the conflict between fluency and accuracy. Fluency is for the spoken language, and uh, more more concern of correctness of language is called as accuracy in written language. So it's the teacher and the students who would decide what should be their focus. Okay. So this is taken from the natural approach, which seems to be more successful because it takes up learning as acquiring. Okay. So eclectic approach can really take up the same, reflect linguistic habits of the child that has already acquired by learning her mother tongue and their ability to assimilate a new language. Okay. I told you that there are modern teaching aids here in the classrooms: audiovisual aids, computers, laptops, gadgets, cell phones, Wi-Fi, everything. Teacher can bring everything in the classroom, or she can ask that these things should be provided to her. Okay, it is flexible and to cope up with various class conditions. This we have already discussed. Other than that, it must ensure that pupils are given the opportunity of having the greatest number of meaningful contacts possible, both with and in the foreign language. That is learner-centered interactive classrooms. Okay. So with this, we have completed the section of methods and approaches. Error analysis you will be covering through your presentations, and syllabus designing will start next week. I will send you the book in a while, okay? And just right after the class. Madhe, whatever information I've asked you to collect, please do collect and let me know. And we'll arrange their presentations, and we'll talk about the assignments on Wednesday. Okay.